Great. So my name is Ana Maria Perez O'Brien. I'm an international consultant for Acceligen, and I take care of regulatory affairs. Tomorrow, I will talk about our regulatory pathway in different countries, and I will have a little bit more time. So today, I decided to focus more on the regulator-developer dialogue and how it has been, and some recommendations I would have to people going on this pathway. So we have faced regulatory systems in Argentina with Conavia, where it's called a previous consultation instance. Basically, you ask the system whether this product is going to be considered a GMO or it falls out of the GMO scope. In Brazil, with CTN Bio, it's called a previous consultation procedure, but it's basically the same. You ask the system, it's a GMO or is it non-GMO? And in the USDA, it's the FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine. It's called an application for intentional genomic alterations in animals. And what you're asking them is whether your product is going to be considered a low risk or a higher risk, and then you have to go to the GMO process. And in the future, we are expecting to interact with Kenya, the National Biosafety Authority, where it's called an early consultation product. And in Nigeria, with the National Biosafety Management Agency, it's called an application for gene editing. In Kenya and Nigeria, the system is very similar to Brazil and Argentina. So general aspects of all the systems I mentioned, they all allow for consultation on products that are under development or even hypothetical products. So go early, start the conversation early, and this can prevent you from going on products that won't be able to commercialize down the line. In most of them, the same process applies to plants, animals, and microorganisms. And here I have to say, except for the US, where there's completely different regulations for each of them. And most of them are focused on the final product rather than in the process, but they all take into account the process to obtain it. They're case by case, scientific evidence-based, and also risk-based analysis goes on all of the systems. The general aspects, we did find that all of them have very open communication channels. So in the US, it involves a very permanent conversation and an open and direct dialogue with the regulators. In Brazil and Argentina, the communication is maintained via email or sometimes phone calls, but they do have direct lines of communication, and we found that this was very effective in all the places. All of the regulators can require clarifications or additional information and additional data before giving their outcome. And in general, what they are trying to prove is there a new combination of genetic material? They will have different wordings for it, but in general, this is what they're trying to prove. If there's no new combination of genetic material, then it usually falls out of the GMO scope. Some personal highlights. So transparency is important. We try to be as open and clear as we can. We know that we are building a long-term relationship. So in general, it's not just putting one paper in and then going out. We want to have a long-term relationship with all of these organizations. And from the company side, try to keep open communication channels. So really make yourself available for discussions. Regarding time frames, so Argentina was the most effective one in our case. It took less than 2 months, so it's quite quick. For Brazil, it's between 2 and 3 months. And in the USA, and this, I have to say, be careful with this because it took us about 6 months, but we came out with a low risk assessment. So if you go for moderate or high risk, it could take you a lot longer than that. And in all cases, the process will take longer when confidentiality is required. So these timeframes will vary if you need to have confidential information. When you're developing the application, so my recommendation would be first try to put yourself on the regulator's shoes. It's easy to stay in your scientist hat, but in this case, I would say try to be or think as the regulator. So use a problem formulation and risk assessment mindset during the development of your documents. Consider the audience. So this one was mentioned yesterday, but think about who you are writing for. What are their worries and their perceptions? So what are they looking for in the document to be clear and feel good about saying yes or no? And think about how your message is best conveyed for your target audience. And state beforehand, if you already know some of the worries or some of the problems that they might encounter, state them and say, what are the possible hazards you already identified? Do you already have some control methods that can be developed or will be used? And the risk management strategies that you already have come up with. This is kind of making their work easier and not just letting them think whatever. Other recommendations, do not make assumptions. So as scientists, we kind of tend to do that, define the methods and the term in the most clear and concise way that you can. Try to be thorough, but brief. So define them, but don't use pages and pages for each term. And try to avoid redundancies. This happens a lot in science, so try to stay clear. Make sure it's understandable for non-scientists and especially non-animal scientists. So in a lot of this, there are plant specialists that are going to review your documents, or microorganism specialists that they don't know how breeding a cow, for example, works. So try to think that it won't be an animal scientist all the time, and define these things that sometimes seem so simple for us, but for other people are not so obvious. Give a clear context of the problem. So what are you trying to solve? Because this would be the key for acceptance. And if you can, use visual aids, show pictures, do graphs, do visual summaries to make the work easier for the regulators. Finally, if you have confidential information, I know it's important as a company, but try to avoid it as much. Only use it when it's necessary and for the parts that are definitely necessary to keep confidential. And my final one is try to participate in trainings in education. Try to listen to people's perspectives so you already get a perception of what could be their worries or what are they going to be looking into. And I finish here. Thank you.